A dead rocket stage had no engine, no power, and no way to steer itself toward anything. Yet astronomers tracked it straight toward the moon and predicted the exact week it would hit. The impact happened on the far side, where no telescope on Earth could ever see it. Months later, a NASA spacecraft swung back over that same spot and photographed something nobody expected sitting on the surface. In late January 2022, an amateur astronomer named Bill Gray noticed something odd in his tracking software. Gray runs a project called Project Pluto, which writes orbit calculation programs used by professional and amateur astronomers alike to follow objects moving through space near Earth. One particular object, cataloged under the temporary label WE0913A, had been sitting in his tracking system for years as an unidentified piece of drifting rocket hardware, and his newest calculations showed its orbit was about to intersect with the moon. Tracking something like WE0913A is much harder than tracking an active satellite. Working spacecraft carry radio transmitters that broadcast their exact position, but a dead rocket stage has no power, no signal, and no way to steer itself. Astronomers can only find it by pointing telescopes at the sky and measuring tiny changes in reflected sunlight bouncing off its metal surface night after night, then feeding those brightness readings into software that reconstructs a probable orbit. Gray had been refining WE0913A's orbit this way for years, and his updated math in January 2022 predicted a lunar impact within a narrow date window and a landing zone accurate to roughly 100 kilometers, a genuinely tight estimate for an object with no engine and no ability to correct its own path. At first, Gray and several other researchers believed they had identified the object correctly. Records seemed to match it to the upper stage of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, the same stage that had helped launch a NASA satellite called the Deep Space Climate Observatory, or DSCOVR, back in February 2015. That identification held for a few weeks, right up until a NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory engineer named John Giorgini emailed Gray with a problem. Giorgini pointed out that the DSCOVR mission's own flight path never actually carried it anywhere near the moon during the relevant time window, which meant the Falcon 9 stage tied to that launch could not be the culprit after all. That correction sent Gray back through older lunar mission records, and he eventually found a much closer trajectory match: the upper stage of a Chinese Long March 3C rocket used to launch the Chang'e 5T1 mission back in October 2014, working out the true identity of a piece of drifting metal that has been silently orbiting for years, invisible and unpowered, turned out to be far harder than tracking exactly where it was going to land. That mismatch, confidently knowing the impact site while barely knowing the object's real identity, became the first thread in a mystery that still has not been fully resolved today. On March 4th, 2022, the rocket body struck the moon exactly where Gray's calculations predicted, near a large old crater called Hertzsprung, on a stretch of terrain scientists refer to as the Mare Orientale region. It came in at roughly 15 degrees from straight down, moving at speeds typical for lunar impacts, fast enough to instantly vaporize a large portion of the debris on contact and kick up a brief plume of dust and rock too small and too far away for any Earth-based telescope to catch. Nobody on Earth could watch the impact happen in real time, for two separate reasons stacking on top of each other. The crash site sat on the far side of the moon, the half that never faces our planet, no matter where you stand on Earth. And the impact also happened while that exact region was sitting in complete darkness. Either problem alone would have blocked a direct view. Together, they made it flatly impossible for any ground-based telescope, no matter how powerful, to see the actual moment of impact. That left researchers waiting on the only spacecraft actually positioned to check afterward. NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, usually just called LRO, has been circling the moon since 2009, taking extremely detailed photographs of the surface for ongoing scientific study. LRO could not watch the impact happen either, since its orbit did not carry it over that exact spot at that exact second. But scientists knew its path would eventually bring it back around, giving them a real chance to photograph whatever the impact had left behind once the dust had settled and the lighting cooperated. That wait stretched into months, not minutes. When the LRO team finally got usable images of the crash site, they were not looking at a simple round hole punched into lunar soil. They were looking at something nobody had predicted, and the shape of it opened up an entirely new mystery layered on top of the one everybody thought had already been solved by Gray's tracking work. LRO captured a before and after pair of images. One taken February 28th, 2022, just days before the crash, and another taken May 21st, 2022, well after it. When researchers lined the two images up side by side, they immediately spotted something new sitting on the surface that had not been there before. It was a crater, but a strange one. Instead of one clean, round hole, the impact had carved out two separate craters overlapping each other. An eastern crater, measuring about 18 meters across, sat directly on top of a slightly smaller western crater, measuring about 16 meters across, together forming one irregular shape, roughly 28 meters wide at its longest point, a little longer than an Olympic swimming pool. This was genuinely unusual. NASA had already recorded craters from other rocket parts hitting the moon before, specifically 4 leftover Saturn rocket stages deliberately crashed into the surface during the Apollo missions to help scientists study moonquakes triggered by the impacts. Every one of those 4 Apollo craters came out either round, when the stage hit nearly straight down, or stretched into an oval shape when it hit at a shallow angle. None of them ever split cleanly into 2 overlapping holes the way this one did, and all 4 were noticeably larger than the new double crater, despite coming from similarly sized hardware. Bill Gray admitted the double shape genuinely puzzled him, noting the impact angle was too steep to explain it the way a very shallow, skipping hit sometimes can. Tanner Campbell, a researcher at the University of Arizona who later studied the impact in detail, pointed out plainly that this was the first time anyone had ever seen a double crater form this way, since Chang'e 5T1's impact came in almost straight down, the exact condition that normally produces a single, clean crater rather than 2. Mark Robinson, the scientist leading the camera team on LRO, offered the leading theory to explain the anomaly. He suggested the rocket body likely carried 2 separate concentrations of mass, one at each end, rather than most of its weight sitting bunched up near the engine the way a typical spent rocket stage usually does, since a normal stage is mostly an empty fuel tank behind a heavy motor. Before we move further into this, if you're finding this interesting, take a second to subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. That detail mattered for more than just explaining the crater's odd shape. If researchers could figure out which known rocket design actually carries 2 heavy sections positioned like that, the crater itself might help settle the identity argument that had already been running for months before the crash even happened. An argument that, as it turns out, has never been fully closed to everyone's satisfaction even years later. Before going further into who scientists eventually settled on as the source of this rocket, it is worth being straight about what an AI chatbot like Grok genuinely contributes to a documented event like this one. Since a lot of recent online content leans on this crash as raw material for dramatic AI-generated commentary, Grok is a chatbot built by xAI, the company founded by Elon Musk, and like other large language models, It is built to read text a person feeds it, then summarize, rephrase, or comment on that text in plain conversational language. That is a genuinely useful skill for everyday tasks like explaining a dense scientific term or condensing a long article into a few sentences. It is not the same thing as running new orbital calculations, analyzing raw satellite imagery pixel by pixel, or physically testing debris in a lab, none of which a text-based chatbot is actually built or equipped to do. Every fact laid out in this video so far, the tracking data, the impact date, the before and after LRO photographs, and Mark Robinson's mass distribution theory, comes directly from NASA's own mission releases and reporting from outlets like space.com, NPR, and the University of Arizona's own news office, going back to 2022. None of it was ever hidden or classified. All of it has been sitting in public archives for years, fully available to anyone willing to read past the headline. Someone types a leading question into Grok, asking it to explain what is strange or suspicious about a double crater on the moon, and the chatbot responds using dramatic, confident language because that is the tone the question itself invited. The chatbot is not running its own investigation into satellite data or reanalyzing anything NASA has not already published. It is restating documented findings back to the person asking, dressed up in a more sensational voice, and that gap between restating a known fact dramatically and actually discovering something new is exactly where a lot of viral AI content quietly slips past people. Chatbots can genuinely help someone unfamiliar with orbital mechanics understand these concepts faster than wading through a technical NASA press release alone, and that part of the tool is worth keeping. The detective work that actually solved pieces of this mystery happened years earlier, done by real astronomers cross-checking real telescope data, and it holds up as a far better story than anything a chatbot conversation adds on top of it after the fact. Once astronomers ruled out the SpaceX Falcon 9 stage, attention shifted fully toward the Chinese Long March 3C rocket that had launched the Chang'e 5T1 mission in October 2014, a technology demonstrator built to test the exact return trip strategy China would later use for its actual lunar sample return mission in 2020. Jonathan McDowell, an astrophysicist at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, who tracks space objects as a regular part of his work, independently checked Gray's new theory and reached the same conclusion, partly using saved tracking data from a small radio beacon built by the company LuxSpace that had flown along with the original Chinese mission. China's government publicly disputed the identification anyway. A spokesperson for China's foreign ministry stated that monitoring data showed the rocket stage tied to the Chang'e mission had already re-entered Earth's atmosphere and burned up completely, which would make it physically impossible for that same stage to be the object now falling toward the moon. Gray and McDowell both treated their own identification as strong but not absolute at the time, with McDowell estimating the team could be about 90% confident, not 100%, based on the tracking evidence available in early 2022. Gray also noted that Space Force tracking data initially cited to support China's claim actually looked more like an assumed re-entry calculated on paper than a confirmed observation of one actually happening. And United States Space Command later confirmed that the rocket's stage had, in fact, never re-entered Earth's atmosphere at all. The identity question did not stay stuck in that uncertain place forever. In a study published later in the Planetary Science Journal, researchers from the University of Arizona analyzed ground-based telescope observations of the object's trajectory and its light signature, essentially studying how sunlight reflected off different surfaces of the tumbling rocket body as it moved. Their combined trajectory and spectroscopic analysis concluded, in their own words, that the object was in fact the Chang'e 5T1 rocket body, closing the technical case about as firmly as an object destroyed on impact can ever be closed. Their analysis also raised an additional, stranger detail, suggesting the rocket stage may have been carrying some kind of undisclosed additional payload beyond its known mission hardware, based on how its mass and light behavior did not perfectly match a standard, empty upper stage. Even with that peer-reviewed conclusion sitting in a respected scientific journal, no Chinese government agency has ever formally withdrawn its original denial or issued a corrected public statement matching the research findings. That leaves a strange gap between what independent scientists have concluded using hard trajectory and spectroscopy data and what any government has been willing to officially confirm on the record. Since the object almost certainly shattered into fragments too small and scattered to ever physically recover, no one will ever be able to settle the argument by simply holding the actual metal in their hands and reading a serial number off it. While chatbot conversations dramatize old NASA photographs well after the fact, actual scientists have spent years building specialized artificial intelligence systems designed specifically to study craters on the Moon and Mars. And this research represents a completely different category of artificial intelligence work than a general-purpose chatbot like Grok. Researchers have trained several different types of deep learning models, including systems called convolutional neural networks, YOLO detection models, and ResNet models, specifically to scan massive volumes of satellite imagery and automatically flag craters that would otherwise require years of manual counting by human researchers working image by image. These models learn by studying huge sets of images already labeled by human experts, teaching the system to recognize the visual patterns that separate a genuine crater from ordinary shadows, boulders, or camera sensor noise. Some of this work uses imagery from NASA's own Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter camera, while other projects have pulled in data from India's Chandrayaan-2 mission and its terrain mapping camera, giving researchers multiple independent sources of high-resolution lunar imagery to train and test their models against. This kind of automated detection matters because craters are one of the most useful tools scientists have for estimating how old a section of planetary surface actually is. Since small asteroids strike planetary surfaces at a roughly steady, predictable rate over long stretches of time, a patch of ground covered in more craters is generally older than a patch with fewer, and counting craters accurately across huge stretches of terrain by hand would take human researchers a lifetime to complete for even a small fraction of the Moon's surface. Despite genuine progress in this field, the technology is far from perfect, and recent research has been refreshingly honest about that limitation rather than overselling it. A 2026 study led by Dr. Stuart Robbins at the Southwest Research Institute compared 8 separate AI-generated lunar crater catalogs against each other. Catalogs that different research teams had built using different models and different training data. The study found that many of the accuracy numbers these AI systems had originally reported for themselves dropped significantly once researchers re-evaluated the results using the same strict scientific standards normally applied to human-made crater counts. Robbins was careful to note that AI still holds real potential for handling repetitive, time-consuming scientific work, especially gathering raw data at a scale humans cannot match. But the study made clear that current automated crater catalogs still need serious human oversight before scientists can fully trust their conclusions without double-checking. That is the real state of AI research connected to lunar craters right now. Careful, peer-reviewed, and openly discussing its own current limitations in a published scientific journal rather than hiding them. It looks almost nothing like a chatbot producing one dramatic paragraph in response to a leading question about a crash it never actually investigated on its own. The gap between those two approaches is exactly why the original mystery, the unconfirmed shape and disputed origin of that specific lunar crater, is still treated as genuinely open by the people who study this professionally, and it is also why a brand new event just days ago is already giving researchers a fresh chance to test their theories against something far better documented. On August 5th, 2026, another spent Falcon 9 upper stage struck the moon, this time near a different old crater called Einstein, on the near side this time rather than the far side. Unlike the 2022 mystery object, this Falcon 9 stage came with a fully documented paper trail. Its mass, somewhere between roughly 4,000 and 4,900 kilograms, its length of about 12 meters, its diameter of about 4 meters, and its exact composition were all already known before it ever hit the surface. Since this stage belonged to a specific, well-tracked SpaceX mission rather than an unidentified object pieced together from years of brightness readings. That level of documentation gives scientists something the 2022 impact never could. Researchers plan to compare fresh LRO images of this new crater against a simulation model called HOSS, which mission planners use to predict how impacts of a known mass and speed should behave, marking the first real opportunity to validate that model against an event where every physical detail of the impactor was confirmed in advance rather than reconstructed afterward through guesswork. McDowell, commenting on the event, made clear the impact itself posed no danger to any existing lunar mission, since no Chinese or other landers sit anywhere near the Einstein crater region. But he also flagged a larger, forward-looking concern, noting that as long-term lunar bases become more realistic in the coming years, similar uncontrolled impacts from leftover rocket stages could eventually become a genuine hazard if space agencies keep leaving old hardware drifting in unpredictable orbits instead of properly disposing of it. This new, far better documented impact does not retroactively solve the 2022 mystery. The Chang'e 5T1 stage remains destroyed and unrecoverable, and its exact internal mass distribution will likely never be confirmed the way this new Falcon 9 stage's specifications already are. What this fresh event does offer is a genuine scientific control group, a known object hitting the moon under conditions researchers can measure and predict in advance, giving them a real yardstick to compare against the stranger, unresolved case from 4 years earlier, once the new crater images and ejecta plume data finish coming in from the observatories currently watching. Even with everything researchers have documented, several genuine questions remain unanswered from the 2022 event specifically. Nobody has ever produced a government confirmation everyone accepts as final, matching the strong trajectory and spectroscopy evidence published in the Planetary Science Journal. That study identified the object as the Chang'e 5T1 booster about as firmly as science can without physical recovery, yet no official Chinese statement has ever caught up to match that published conclusion, leaving an odd gap between the strongest available evidence and any universally agreed final word. The exact reason behind the double crater shape also remains a strong theory rather than a directly confirmed fact. Mark Robinson's explanation involving uneven mass distribution across the rocket body lines up with basic physics and fits the observed crater dimensions well. But since the object shattered into fragments too small and scattered to ever recover and physically examine, nobody can confirm that theory the way a scientist normally would with an actual recovered piece of hardware sitting on a lab table. There is also a broader question sitting underneath this entire story, one that stretches well beyond a single rocket stage. Nobody currently maintains a complete, fully reliable list of every piece of old rocket hardware still drifting silently through space near the moon, waiting for its own orbit to eventually intersect with the lunar surface the way this one did. Bill Gray happened to catch WE0913A because he was already tracking it as part of his ongoing work at Project Pluto. But there is no guarantee every future lunar impactor gets spotted with the same advance warning before it hits, a concern McDowell himself raised directly in connection with the August 2026 Falcon 9 impact. Whether better tracking systems, sharper satellite imagery, or properly validated AI crater detection models eventually close these remaining gaps is something only continued research will determine. What is already clear is that the real story here needed actual astronomers, actual spacecraft, and actual peer-reviewed science to get this far. And no chatbot conversation has added a single verified fact to any part of it. Here is where things actually stand. In early 2022, astronomer Bill Gray tracked an unidentified drifting rocket stage cataloged as WE0913A and correctly predicted it would strike the far side of the moon on March 4th, 2022, near Hertzsprung crater. Nobody on Earth could watch the impact happen directly, since the site was both on the far side of the moon and sitting in darkness at the time, and the object was first mistaken for a SpaceX Falcon 9 stage before a NASA engineer's correction pointed researchers toward a Chinese Chang'e 5T1 booster instead. Months later, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter photographed the crash site and found something nobody expected, a double crater formed by a single impact, unlike any of the 4 Apollo-era rocket craters recorded before it. A later study, published in the Planetary Science Journal, used trajectory and light signature analysis to conclude the object really was the Chang'e 5T1 stage, even suggesting it may have carried an undisclosed extra payload. Though China's government has never officially matched that conclusion in a public statement. Genuine AI research is being applied to lunar crater science today, built by planetary scientists using deep learning models, and a 2026 Southwest Research Institute study has already shown that even this specialized version of AI still needs real human verification before its conclusions can be trusted. A newer, far better documented Falcon 9 impact near Einstein crater in August 2026 is now giving researchers a fresh chance to test their models against a known object. No chatbot conversation has uncovered any new fact about any of this. The mystery has been sitting in NASA's own public archive since 2022, waiting for anyone willing to actually read it. If you want more stories that separate real, documented science from a good headline, subscribing costs nothing and keeps this channel chasing down stories exactly like it.